Welcome everybody to a breakfast show. This is 11 a.m. on Tuesdays. We only have a couple of more shows after today and then the series is over, baby. Today I'm with Tammy-hennion. Hello, Tammy.
Hey, hello.
Yeah, sound effect would have been nice right there. Now, today we're talking about the Philadelphia experiment and we're also talking about Montauk. Now, these are pretty controversial, I don't even want to call them conspiracies. I think they're the sort of things that have got a basic story and something that probably happened that's been built upon. And, and as you got YouTube got bigger and the internet got bigger, then, of course, conspiracy theorists jump all over it, add to it, expand it. Next minute, it's very hard to find what actually did go on. And yet they're two very interesting, very persistent things that go there. And I always have a little thing in my own mind that if something's persistent, if it keeps pushing on through, then something probably did happen. And so Tammy's going to fire us out there with the Philadelphia experiment. Take it away, Tammy.
Yay. Ta-da. So, my interesting thing is the Philadelphia experiment, which originally, like you say, it's you can't say it's conspiracy, but it's like, did it happen? Did it happen? It all, so supposedly started out, it was all called the Project Rainbow, and then from the CIA, and then after that, they changed the name into little different things. So the Philadelphia experiment involved the USS Eldridge, and what happened was this all happened with the Navy. They were trying to. There was World War II. So what the initial thing was, they were trying to do like what they have like the stealth today, a cloaking device to hide the warships in the time of the war then. And so what I find there's so many different things that I find interesting and weird about this is, and the dates and everything is like conflicting. But at this time, they were trying to cloak the ship, and they employed Albert Einstein at that time. He was employed as a part-time for the Navy to, I guess, help them along with this project. And what they were trying to do is, through the electromagnetic field, make it's a thing called dosing, which they would, with the electricity, kind of bend light in order to like camouflage the boat. The problem was that they were saying that no, he's employed by us, but he's working on a project about explosions and explosives, which I kind of thought was funny because he was working on the unified theory. Which it coincides with what they were trying to do. It was also said that this is like kind of what happened. They were really trying to study about teleportation and time, linear time and space. And what they were doing was covering it up with this trying to bend light and camouflage the thing. So on some accounts, they're saying that, oh, well, it was, they were surprised. They didn't know that it was going to happen. But in other accounts, it does. And so all this started to really come up and be famous because of one gentleman. I think his name is Jesse. What's his name? He was a writer, and and he did like on UFOs and stuff like that. And there's another gentleman, his name is Al Belich, that came forward and kept writing to him and telling him that he was there on this experiment, which happened twice. And so there's, again, more conflicting stories because one they said it was in October of the 1943, and then the other one because then there was more experiments where they did it again in August. So there's like 3 or 4 different conflicting dates of when all this went on, and it's funny because off on the records, of course the Navy wiped out all the records of all of this happening, and then, but yet they say afterwards that the other experiment happened. So there's like a lot of going back and forth. No, it didn't happen. There's nothing on the records, but yeah, it happened. And yes, and at one point they were trying to turn around and say that Dr. Tesla was also involved in this. There was 3 of them that were employed, which at this time in '43, Dr. Tesla was dead. So, there's a lot of funny stuff going on around this one. Let's see what else. So this is a crew that they did the experiment on, and supposedly when they teleported, that when they came back, if they weren't in the right spot, that a lot of some of them got stuck in the hole. They were saying a lot of them, had went insane. They had heart attacks, and so they look. That would be a major reason to cover this up, if things went awry because they messed up the experiment. And this one here is because it was a destroyer. They went out to. There was a couple of them, and this is like supposed to be the real pictures of in 1943 of the crew that went out, and this is before the cloaking device when they did it. And like you could see over here as they're starting to initiate it, because what they did was what happened. Supposedly they started this in the lab, and some of the tools had started to disappear. So they figured, oh, hey, we could do this to a ship, and somehow they made some sort of device and they put it on the ship, and they were, I guess, testing it out. So you could see where it's supposedly called the high energy arc welding, and which it does is like it does like a lightning kind of thing, and then it opens up a black hole. And then that's supposedly what happened was the ship went into the black hole, and then you could see afterwards that the ship is gone. So
it's an interesting thing. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing, and I'd like to point out that actually light refraction, for all of the conspiracy add-ons, the light refraction technology was begun in in the 1800s actually, but it was actually completed in in 1919, so a long time before these came on. And we've got what they call what's the name of it again? There's a name of it. Hang on. Well, it's refraction, but there's actual products you can buy now. You can actually download things even that bend light. And what actually happens is a cloaking device. Yeah. What actually happens is a cloaking device is that your eye follows light. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. It follows the line of light. And so when the light is bent, what happens is you can't see whatever the object is on the other side.
Right. And that's what is Gaussing. Degaussing is what they were supposedly what they were trying to do. And that was, I have a picture of that, with the device and stuff, what they did. See, so this is when supposedly this is the lightning thing is the arc. It's high energy welding, and what they do is they produce a lightning so strong. And one of the other things is that what happened was when the ship was in the Delaware Bay, it was in Philadelphia, and when they did the second time, it disappeared and went to Norfolk, Virginia, and so it went back in time. And so when this lightning thing happened, is when the black hole opened and the ship went through and went back in time into where Norfolk is. And then went back again, and so that made a shift in the timeline. And so supposedly when they do this, it pinches time space into space time, and then it produces the this black hole. And this is the Gaussian, the stuff that they put on, which does this. It bends the light supposedly. So, but what they did was this: is they opened up a black hole with that lightning, and they went through. And when they went through, like if you weren't in the same spot as you were before they left, then the bodies would get all mangled into the hull. There was 5 bodies, I think. A lot of men went insane. A lot of them were had heart attacks, were sick. So like that's a big thing to try and tell people, sorry we did this to your family, And it was 1943. So things were different back then.
Oh, go back. Get back there, girl.
So, imagine having to tell your family that. So I really think that they did it. I think that they were trying to like it said, the diversion with this project, the Philadelphia project, was a big diversion for what they were really trying to do, the teleportation, and I have some links. I found some very interesting stuff. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of well, I'm sure they have David Wilcock, and he does a lot of the conspiracy stuff too. But he has a lot of thing on the whole timeline and what
right.
About the space the travel and stuff, because they were initially out to this is another thing that gets me. Like they're saying, no, Einstein never, he didn't work for us. He didn't finish the unified theory. He wasn't doing nothing about electromagnetism and gravity and none of that. No, he was working for us part-time doing the explosions. Really?
Really, yeah. Well, there's actually evidence of what he did do. This is how he got famous. I don't know if you're aware of that, everybody, but Einstein got famous for his measuring light deflection technology. I don't even know what you want to call it, but it was actually Britain, not America. Just sad to say, guys, but not everything happened in America. The British expeditions were organised and sponsored by the Royal Astronomical Society and the Royal Society of Britain, and 2 groups took photographs of a region of the sky centred on the sun during May 1919, where there was a total solar eclipse, and compared the positions of the photographed stars with those of the same stars photographed from the same location in July 1919. In other words, they shouldn't have been too far off. When the sun was far from that region of the sky, and the results showed that the light was deflected, so it was the first proof that light bent right there. And this is Einstein's work. And they showed that the general relativity theory is correct, but it wasn't correct with Newtonian physics, so it became this argument between the two. The subsequent publicity catapulted Einstein to world fame, so that's what made him famous, and he had the only ticker tape, to my understanding, parade ever held for a scientist on Broadway in New York City. So there you go. So they held that there for him, but in actual fact it was funded in England. So there you go. And I think that's probably because of who wanted to use it and what they wanted to use it for. Bearing in mind this is 1919. It's a long way before the Philadelphia experiment, the Rainbow Project. Yeah.
Right.
But it goes to show that's what the man was doing. He was actually doing that stuff. And they were measuring light and trying to find out how it affected, and they did find out that a bent light makes what's beyond it invisible to the eye. So I don't doubt that they did that at all. The time thing, I don't know. But I do know that they probably did actually do that. They didn't.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah,
they did.
Yeah.
They showed in the thing, but the what they were saying is like, okay, that was just a front because they were trying to dabble and experiment in teleportation. Was that what they were trying to say? This is a front for that,
Yeah, I don't
But
know so much. I know people want to believe that, but, when you look at like Dr. Michio Kaku in recent times, in 2012 it might have been, and I watched him do a demonstration of why teleportation doesn't work, and it's the very reason you're talking about. But this is, been talked about for years, and he said basically to teleport something, which we all get, you have to break it down to its particles. As soon as you've broken it down to its particles, as he said, a human being is dead.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, they're dead. They've been broken apart. This is in more recent times, he is very doubtful that we are in a position to put that back together again.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a wee bit. Sorry, dude. Now, he showed they had a time bending. They've made a portal. They've made a time bending tunnel, I guess, is the best thing. But it's tiny. And he said they've moved particles through it. So they've moved particles through it from one place to the next. There's a teleportation thing. Forget time. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Teleportation thing. And they actually showed it working. He says the problem is that to make anything decent move through it, made it this big. It's the size of like a coat hanger, I guess, to move a particle. He says to transfer that to, say, a box even, you'd have to make it so big that it becomes capable of blowing up a continent if it goes wrong. So you go, okay, so we're not doing that on Earth. That's not going to ever happen. Yeah, well, we have to put it out in space to do it. And then as he pointed out, and I bow down to his technical knowledge and his resources. He said, basically, we don't have the technology yet to build something like that. We can make it tiny, but we couldn't make it big because we would have to put it out in space, basically. So it's an interesting area of questioning, but I really do think that they made the light refracting thing work. I really do believe that because it was too persistent, it's too ongoing. The rest,
I just
I don't know.
Get it why that they would turn around and say, no, we employed Dr. Einstein there, and we don't have him for unified theory to bend light, but he's doing explosives, like.
Well, the thing
why?
is, they already had other people doing explosives by 1943. They had that under wraps, by the way. They had the nuclear bomb, and Dr. Einstein wasn't anywhere near that. So what was his name? He was the Jesuit, the Jewish man, doctor. What was his name? Hang on, I'll find him. And he was on the American books, and of course we know what happened in Japan. So Oppenheimer was his name, Robert Oppenheimer. Yeah, and he was the man that actually made the nuclear bomb, or it was back then they called them atom bombs. And so he designed and made the atom bomb, which was used, to harness the Japanese to put them down, if you like. So that was already happening. With Tesla, another interesting thing, because, that's what I mean about the conspiracy theorists. They just chuck stuff on. As you
they chuck names out there.
It's already dead. And I've seen those too, and I'm like, yeah, nah, perhaps not. If you think about, even Einstein would have been an old man, in 1943, he was pretty much getting on. Yeah, when you look at those, and they're all like Tesla, this and that, there are lots of scientists. There are lots of scientists in the world, and when they decide to do a specific thing, then they get the specialists in that thing. They take that person who's got that under their belt and they use that. And Einstein definitely had the light thing going, but they would have had a team of how many scientists? Who knows?
Yes.
Yeah. When it came up to the World War II, before World War II, Tesla was running around because he reckoned he could create a plane that would be undetectable, by the way, and that
like the Locklear U-2,
whatever. Yeah, and it could be he called it a weapon of mass destruction. Now, the Americans, here's the thing, this is really important because this is actual history, right? The Americans said, no, we're not interested. So he went to the Russians to try and sell it to them. And they said, sure. And they Yeah, absolutely. That'll be great. And they gave him a million or $2 million, somewhere in that. It was like the equivalent of $1 or $2 million, which was huge money back
Oh.
then.
Mm-hmm.
But true to form, this Tesla did a lot. He didn't finish the project, which you also have mentioned earlier. And he didn't finish the project, and nobody knows really, because it was Russia at the time, whether
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work or whether, nobody
Right,
knows.
because they said it's still open for debate.
Well,
They said
the
it was
Russians
never
owned
closed.
it in the end.
Yeah,
Not,
I mean
yeah.
the theory that he didn't finish or whatever that was.
Well, he didn't finish a lot of things, by the way. So if you look at Tesla's history, he would have this magnificent idea, but he was a bit arrogant, and so he wouldn't share it with other people. So he'd try and do it all himself. So he wasn't a team player. So he didn't have a specialist who knew. With his power tower, they rebuilt that. I don't know if you know that either, but they rebuilt that. I'm not too sure if it was 15 years ago or maybe a little bit longer, and they built it exactly to his specifications with everything in it, including his coil, and it didn't work, and they came to the conclusion the materials, it would never have worked with those materials. He would have needed different materials, and that was probably Tesla's biggest failure in life, really, was the things he invented that were amazing, he lost control of because he wanted money to play with these other projects. What's the fridge guy, Westinghouse? Westinghouse paid for his accommodation for the rest of his life because Westinghouse took his invention and couldn't afford to keep making it, So he had to go to him and say, I can keep paying you royalties, but I'm going broke. And so Tesla signed it over to him. Now, there's a lot of criticism about that, but if you look at it, you go, he was making a choice. Either his product gets made and it works, or it doesn't, and it goes under. And so basically that was it. But Westinghouse didn't do him in so much as when things came his way and he got rich, he paid for everything. If Tesla wanted money for anything, he would ring him up. He paid for the hotel that he lived in. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. It's a long time ago. But I think Tesla was inept. The mad scientist. He could do stuff, but he wasn't good at, he wasn't organized, or he didn't have follow through. He needed to be in a team, but then he couldn't be in a team because he thought everybody was dumb, And that's not my take on it. He actually said that, by the way. He said, none of you have the vision that I have. None of you are clever enough. None of you are intelligent enough. He thought women were particularly stupid. So he was an arrogant, solitary man. And very interesting stuff when it comes to all of this, when you look at this. There would have been a crowd of scientists around this Philadelphia experiment, it wouldn't have been...
Oh, yeah, it's just like back then, we were talking in the 40s. This happened in the 42, 43, and, although, I mean, it's kind of funny about, it's the Navy, they're trying to hide things because, it's World War II time, and so they're trying to do different things,
exactly.
to, for war, just like they have the stealth thing. I mean, but it's just like they made it such a big, afterwards, because this other guy, Jesse, I forgot his name, he was trying to make a living on doing the books. He was doing the UFO theories and stuff like that. And there's Al Gelbeck or something. He was insistent that he was there from the beginning. He experienced all the stuff on both the Philadelphia project and then on to the Montauk project. So he was there from the beginning to end, the lone survivor. And they were writing this book about all the, experiences and stuff that went on, and the conspiracies. Morris K. Jessup was the one who did the book, and there's a couple of different characters, but they have about how he's such a liar and conjured up all this stuff just for publicity's sake, and especially the guy. I mean, he made his livelihood, his whole life out of this, and in the end, he wound up committing suicide because, just people weren't going for it.
Yeah.
So,
It's
there's only so much.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
There's only so much. I mean, it would come up and down. It's only so much as you can believe. Like you're saying, there's lots of scientists and lots of people, I'm sure, that were working on this project, and like you say, people, the molecules explode. That's it. You can't go back.
Yeah. There is, but the light thing is real.
Oh yeah,
and it is around, and that's the thing. To me, that's where, with not all of the conspiracy theories, obviously, but with some of them, there's definitely that basic truth, and then everything else is built upon. Preston, who I'll be talking about with the Montauk project, you can judge for yourself by listening to the guy, and they have these panel talks. I mean, it's all out there. You can go and listen to them talking about their experience as they say it is. And as you hear them, and Duncan Cameron, as you hear them, you can decide for yourself whether you think they're, nuts, or whether you think that they sound like considered, intelligent people. It's a good thing to. That's probably the best thing about the YouTube phenomenon, is that you can actually go and listen to that man directly telling you, and as he's telling you that, as you're listening to him, as you're looking at him, you can determine for yourself what you believe and what you don't believe. I can promise you they've made a lot of money off this, so we can't pretend they're doing it altruistically, because they really have. Rihanna says the question is, where did they get the technology and advancement from? Wasn't as way advanced. I do sit there and I've just said to you, they did this experiment with the sun, and they proved that light bends. From that one thing, everything else flows. I really do think it's a little dismissive to assume that humans can't work it out, The Romans built bridges and archways that were just about indestructible way before you had mechanics, and way before the industrial era. So why couldn't we develop that? Now, if they used the sun, and then they position things from the sun to talk and find out about light refraction, then
they had that machine that supposedly helped with the wiring and all of this to bend the light. But the sun, it's like the natural, when you can see it even without this. Like you're saying, the sun bends around objects, and it becomes blurred. You can't see it.
You've got that. It's a really interesting area, because most of man's inventions come from nature, if not all. I have to say all, really, when I think on it. When they've played with lights, we've got laser beams. Nobody questions that man worked that one out for themselves. So they've learned how to bend light, and they can bend a laser beam. They can curve it around. They can almost make it a circle. They can make it go in whatever shape they want it to. They can bend and manipulate light, and they can do that because light is actually traveling through time. Light isn't a static energy. They know a lot more about light than the average person thinks they know about light, which is, we've got the Light Institute in Germany. There's so much information out there about biophotonic emissions, about what are the most. I love this subject. You know this, right, Tammy? What is it's light? We're talking Dorothy stuff now. We're talking light. That they use light to clean your teeth, right? It breaks down calculus. Which is really hard. You try and get calculus off with anything else, and they've got to scrape it. Remember the old days of scraping and pushing and my gosh,
laser
pushing. Yeah, it's not laser. It's UV light that they use.
Oh yeah,
and they just use a UV light, and the UV light's directed, and it breaks down the calculus. It's an amazing thing. They use the laser to cut your skin, and they use the same laser in a different style of beam to cut steel. They can control it to such a massive degree. All of the new beauty treatments of the last 15 to 20 years are light treatments. They take your skin off. They do. They just use ultra, and they use they use lead light to reduce tumors of cancer, just by shining it on the spot. So light itself is a phenomenal and awesome resource that they have been working with and using for what is now nearly 100 years. It didn't happen in a minute, you know. They first discovered and started working with light refraction in the late 1800s, and they get to 1919, and Einstein proves the theory, and then we get to 2016, and the beginning that was has led to all of these other light technologies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What can we say? Radar is a light. You know, when you think about radar, when you look at a computer, it's all light, isn't it? It's light being used in different ways, which gives us our imagery.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cables? Fiber optic cables, right? What's running through them? Light.
Light. Mm-hmm.
Light. So it's a phenomenon. I actually, you know what, I quite often get a little bit more surprised that people are stunned by something like this, but they think, you know, Sky TV, you know, satellite TVs, that's normal. that's nothing, you know, and it cracks me up. It really does crack me up. You know, you can put a little dish on the roof of your house and point it at the sky, and you can watch TV 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, da-da-da-da. And that's all manipulating light. It's manipulating frequencies of light. It's manipulating frequencies of radio. Well, actually, I think it's fiber optics. We move way beyond the radio frequencies, but we still use those. Now, I think we need to understand all of these frequencies exist. They existed before we knew how to use them, and so man just finds a way to use something that's already there, which I think is pretty awesome, actually. As long as it's used for the power of good. Isn't that right?
Yep. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating. And the reason the Montauk and Philadelphia, in more recent times, because they never used to be, they used to always be kept quite separate, but in more recent times they've chucked the two together, which is the thing that you initially struggled with, was like, hang on a minute, let's get them separate. And again, you had an initial story, which I remember from 20-odd years ago, and then you start seeing it with the new age of conspiracy online. You see it evolving, and then they're getting lumped together because, in actual fact, one thing was not the same as the other, but the theorists, or the guys in charge of the information that are meeting it out, if you like, are the ones that are rolling that through, because there's big money in conspiracy theories. There's big money in titivating potential in a person's mind, because they seem to be able to tip that over. Do you know what I mean? It's instead of going, this is potential that we can play with, and scientists are working with it. They're working with it today. They were working with it yesterday. They'll be working with it tomorrow. But when you start looking at it, when you look at Preston, who has a claim to being a Montauk scientist developing this thing, there's not one design of the Montauk chair that looks like an engineer did it. You know, it looks just like a standard drawing. Engineers draw pretty well, and they draw design because that's what they do. So there's a lot of interesting stuff, but I do think that the experiment happened, and I do think that the Montauk project happened. I just think that they do themselves and humanity a disservice by not sticking to the true story, and by
like I said, they named the whole thing. You know, this is where the whole confusion came in. It was the Project Rainbow, and then within that is like all of these experiences, the Phoenix experiment, the Montauk, the Philadelphia, and they just, like you say, they crammed it all into one ball of wax. When no, there's different things going on.
There's different things, and there's also that, you know, there's not much information, and so you've got a certain amount of people who want to suggest they've got more information than everybody else. I don't doubt, because does everybody remember Uri Geller? Do you remember Uri Geller?
No.
He was the guy that could bend spoons on telly.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, Deb does. Hiya, Deb. Uri Geller claimed, this is a very long time ago, we used to watch him on telly when, you know, bell-bottom pants and polyester was all the rage, and he'd be bending spoons. Do you know, when I started my little psychic journey, that was one of the first things I tried, bending a spoon, because I just thought, I'd watched him as a kid. In the 70s.
Just look at I.
Surely I can do that by now. so funny. But no, he used to teach you. He used to get on the telly and he used to say, do this. You can go to YouTube and you'll find him teaching you how to bend a spoon, by the way. Women would claim he got them pregnant without touching them, you know. He had some wacko things. He had a movie which I watched probably about, I don't know, 15 years ago, and then I watched it again about 10 years ago, and it was quite phenomenal. But what happened in that movie was he said he was kidnapped. He said he was asked to go to, now bearing in mind that things like Montauk Project and that were all out, okay, just so as we know, it's not like they weren't out, but back in the 70s, getting this sort of information for most people wasn't so easy. You had to go to the paranormal shop.
Paranoid too.
Oh my goodness. You had to go to the paranormal shop, or you had to be in the know. It was like finding a psychic. You had to know somebody who'd been to one to find one, sort of a thing. And it was like that back then. They were all like the black market books. Yeah. Hush, hush. It was all a bit exciting. And so there was, but people that were in the money, that were around stars, people, they had access to this stuff, even if most of us didn't. We just had the TV thing. Anyway, he made this movie, and he made it way back in the 70s or maybe the early 80s. And he talks about, he was asked by the CIA to go, and they wanted to talk to him about whether he could read minds and all of that sort of stuff. I believe that probably happened, There's no doubt if you're going to be into spy versus spy stuff, that having somebody who could read minds would be advantageous. So it's probably, if not likely, that they did these experiments. Now, interestingly enough, they talk about that in the Montauk. So you start off with something that you think is very reasonable, and I'm happy to stretch out beyond what's reasonable and comprehensible, but then you start going, well,
real thin line there.
It's starting to get, because if you were going to draw diagrams of something so you could reveal it to the world, you'd make them pretty accurate. You'd make them pretty clear, and you will see when we get there. But there's that whole, they leave themselves open to issue, because that any of these experiments would have bona fide doctors, bona fide psychiatrists, bona fide scientists, because they want it to work.
Of course.
Yeah, they want it to work. So it's a big deal. So when he made this movie, Uri Geller, and he wrote books about it, he wrote a lot of little books. When he wrote about them and when you saw him interviewed about them, he was really interesting. So he said they asked him and they interviewed him, and then they tried to hold him, that they didn't want to let him go. Basically, he was saying they were going to stick me in a room and they were going to test my brain and hook me up to a machine. Now, he says that, so he ran away. And that was the end of it. And he was quite well known. He was quite famous. And so then he ends up with that, because he's famous, they couldn't really touch him. That would have been a bit too obvious. There would have been newspapers and TV and stuff like that running around. So he claims that they just sort of left him be, but he did visit with them a number of times. So it's an interesting thing, because, of course, yes, they'd go after him. And there's Kreskin as well, if everybody remembers the mighty Kreskin. So you had these guys coming out on telly through the 70s. So we're way after the 40s now. But there's still an interest, because you've got the Cold War. You've got this big spy versus spy culture in England and Russia and America as this little triad, of we've got more spies. I even listened to a guy in England saying not too long ago, there's about 2,500 spies in London alone. I'm thinking, they're not very good if they're there. It's like, cracks me up. It's almost like there's this whole subterfuge that isn't a subterfuge, and people are getting paid to play games. It's kind of weird, I think. But anyway, so you've got this culture that suggests that having this ability, having this ability to read somebody's mind and read energy consistently would have value. And so I can't see any reason why they wouldn't test that, But the bottom end of it all comes down to is that they're not using this kind of technology today. Therefore, it didn't work. We were talking about that on Peripheral Visions, that with the guys the black suit guys after you see a UFO are supposed to come along and threaten people and so on and so on. And then you've got people saying that it's man's technology, spaceships and stuff like that they were hiding. Well, if they were hiding it in the 50s, where is it? That's my question. If we all know about the technology once it becomes that it's working, once it becomes usable, once it gets used, we all get to see it and hear about it. But none of those things came to pass. So then something else is going on, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. You can hand me back those tools anytime you like, my darling.
Okay.
For the Montauk part. There's this interesting. Oh no, you can't. I've got to take it off you. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Here we go.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here fumbling, saying, "Okay, what
button?
Which one?
What do I have to do? What do I have to do?" We've also got Rihanna saying, apparently there is a place in the city of London, and scientists from World War II were brought there. I'm pretty sure they would have protected the scientists as well. A lot of them were bloody German. Most of the top scientists in the entire world came out of Europe and out of the East as well. There were the Arabic scientists that were just doing phenomenal things. To this day, the most noted mathematicians in the world are Arabic, Arabic is our math. That's where it came from. So it's an interesting things. She's saying also that names were changed and what they were doing was hush-hush. And I really believe that happened. And I believe it happened for a variety of reasons. One was they didn't want these people that had top secret information that they were working on, that it wasn't to hide it from the Brits and it wasn't to hide it from the Americans so much. It was to hide it from the enemy. And back then there was an enemy, right? There was an enemy. When you look at what goes on today, the first thing you notice about and what happened with the atom bomb, the first thing that happens when you have something powerful and you want your enemy to see it, you want them to know you've got it. It's not a secret. You want them to know that you're superior, and by hiding your superiority, you aren't gaining anything at all. So I don't believe technology from 50 years ago